Hello everyone and welcome to another live edition here on my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Titian and his wonderful painting techniques. For those of you that are joining for the first time, welcome to my channel. And for those of you that join every week or every other week, thank you for your wonderful support. So today I have a really exciting presentation. I'm going to be talking about particular grounds, gesso grounds. This is a subject that I've covered before when I presented the techniques of El Greco. El Greco was trained as a Venetian painter, and he was influenced by Titian, one of the great painters of the late Renaissance, and he's one of my favorite artists. And today I want to share a reconstruction that I did using historical materials, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about this gesso ground that seems so mysterious for a lot of artists. There seems to be two types of gesso grounds that were used during this time period in late 16th, the late 16th century or the high Renaissance. And it seems that artists were using two different types of materials, an organic, natural gypsum, uh, and also a slate gypsum material. And I've done both reconstructions now. Today I'm going to be showing you the reconstruction of the gesso, the natural gesso, using just gypsum, natural gypsum without being heated or slaked. And this results in a very different material. And there's a lot of details that I want to share with you guys. But before I get started, I want to welcome you. And for those of you that have not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and share the content with your friends. Thank you for coming by. And also, I want to tell you a little bit about my courses on the Udemy server. A lot of you have been writing about the Rembrandt course, and now it's been released on the Udemy server. A lot of you purchased the course, and I really appreciate the support. I'm planning on releasing more courses in the future, but right now, you could, if you're interested in checking out that course, you could, in the description below, you could find a link where you could log on. And if you're interested in purchasing the course, there you could find a coupon. You get a nice discount. So, and there's other courses too, drawing course. There's three drawing courses, a portrait drawing course, classical drawing, and an old master drawing techniques. So a lot of information. I'm continuing with the live presentations, in-depth study of the old master techniques for those of you that are joining for the first time. And in this particular live presentation, I'm going to be going in-depth into some of the techniques that Titian used to execute his paintings. So let's just get started. I want to start by just giving you a background on Titian, one of my favorite painters and probably one of the greatest painters that ever lived. Titian was born in 1488, around there. Some sources document 1488 and some others document 1490. So it's not really well documented. There's no records of his birthday, but there's suspicions that he was born around this time. And it seems that Titian apprenticed early on with Sebastiano Zuccato, and later on transferred to the studio of Giovanni Bellini, one of Venice's great painters, and probably the most important painter in Venice at the time. Giovanni Bellini was responsible for a lot of the altarpieces commissions, and he was also the teacher of Giorgione, who was a classmate of Titian. And Giorgione had a profound influence on Titian, especially his handle of light, his handle of atmosphere, and brushwork. And this is important because early on, Titian is working in a very, very tight style, control style, and Giorgione begins displaying this loose manner in his work, and Titian adapted this manner. And a lot of early sources confuse the two painters. They sometimes confuse the work of Giorgione, and they also confuse the work of Titian. They were commissioned to do a mural for the Fondaco de Tedici, which I believe I'm saying it right. It's in Italian. It was the German businessman foundation in Venice, and they did this amazing murals. And uh, everyone thought that the murals were by Giorgione, but indeed they were by Titian. And this really gave a claim to Titian's career and set him on a successful path as a painter. So I want to begin by showing you some images of his handling and in particular his underdrawing. Titian used an underdrawing to begin his paintings, uh, but in a very different way. He was not transferring a drawing like a lot of other late Renaissance artists. He was working directly with the brush and working with very fluid paint directly on the canvas. And this has a profound effect on the art of painting because a lot of artists began working in this very method. So let's just go ahead and take a look at this slideshow that I prepared for you guys. And here you could see an image of Virgin and Child from 1512. And there you could see the underdrawing, the radiograph right next to the painting. And look at how Titian is working with very fine lines, but he's not following these lines strictly. It seems like these lines are, very, very, very loosely applied. They're not, they have not been altered. Initially, they're just laid down, and then he just works freely on top. Even though this is a very controlled painting, he's not really following, for example, the creases on the sleeve of the Virgin. He's not really following that detailed underdrawing. So, and look at the changes that he makes on the child's face. He turns the head. It was originally looking at the mother, and now it's looking away from the mother. These are typical examples of Titian's style. And I've talked about this before in a lot of my other um, live presentations, the idea of pentimento, which is essentially changing your mind. It's in Spanish, it's called arrepentimiento, and essentially it's a correction that is made directly on the canvas using just paint. There's no underdrawing. The artist just paints right on top and makes a correction. And Titian became an expert at this way of painting, essentially working with a very rough underdrawing and just working up the image and making changes as he saw fit during the painting process. So let's just move on to another image. Let's see. So we have another image here. So this is it's very interesting to note that in here you see another radiograph, and look at the beautiful calligraphy behind the Cupid figure. There seems like there was initially an initial drawing just with very schematic black lines. And these black lines are done in a very loose way, right with the brush, probably a fluid medium such as oil or oil thinned out with some sort of solvent. And this is important. And by the way, you could find a nice, beautiful PDF article by the National Gallery, and I've provided a link below where you could take a look at some of the findings by the National Gallery. So a lot of detailed information in that PDF, in that technical journal. But look at how Titian is essentially drawing directly on the canvas. He's working on a gesso ground, calcium sulfate, gypsum ground with an imprimatura, or sometimes not, which I'm going to be demonstrating in a little bit. And look at how he's essentially just changing freely and painting with opaque paint this is a very, very important development in Titian's work, because later on, the next generation of artists such as Velázquez and Rubens and even Caravaggio adapted this technique of just the free drawing on the canvas. There's no transfer drawing. This is essentially drawing what the Italians call la invenzione. It's essentially creating. He most likely was working from drawings, from preparatory drawings or some sort of study, but there was no transfer of the drawing. So really important to know, this is a key development, and it's important to realize this in the development of Titian's painting style. So let's just go ahead and move on to our next image. And as I'm showing you some of these images, I want to remind you some of these images I've taken from other sources, such as the National Gallery Technical Bulletin, but most are my images that I took from my last trip to Italy. So you'll be able to see some details. This is a painting that I took at the Uffizi Gallery of Flora, painted in 1515. And this is essentially a very, very refined style. Titian here is working most likely with a very, very fine weave, as documented by the National Gallery Technical Bulletin. In his early years, to about 1530, 1540, Titian is working with a very, very fine weave canvas. And this produces a very fine, detailed style, and it's typical of a lot of northern painters. You see that in canvases by even early Rubens. He's working a very, very fine weave. But even painters from an earlier generation, they're choosing this very fine weaves that essentially leave a very smooth surface. So most likely the gesso is applied with a spatula, which has also been documented by the National Gallery Technical Bulletin. And this is to cover the weave of the canvas, and he's working with velaturas. This is an important development, glazes and velaturas. Now, I've had a lot of students ask me if there's a grisaille layer, and they don't find any grisaille layers in these paintings by Titian. It just seems like it's limited color, but it's not black and white like some other painters that we've studied. So let's just go ahead and move on to the next image. And again, you see here just the controlled aspect of the drawing. There's glazes and the velaturas, which of course are part of just the typical Renaissance technique that were employed by a lot of earlier painters. Here we have a painting of Pope Paul III from 1543. And this is a painting that it's a departure for Titian. He was working here with a very rough weave linen. I saw this painting in person at the Capodimonte Museum in Naples. It's a wonderful portrait, a portrait that is very, it has a lot of textural effects that you don't see in earlier works. And here you begin to see how Titian begins to develop that very loose style, working with the material aspect of paint and not so much with just rendering forms, except just working with the drawing and what they called colore. So I have a really nice detailed here that I want to show you. And this is something that a lot of artists from the 17th century, especially Velázquez, when he traveled to Italy, he saw a lot of these works. And look at just how beautiful the textures on the forehead. He's using thick paint. He's dragging the paint. He's working in secco. It's very interesting because I've had some of you that have purchased my Udemy course on Rembrandt, and I had recently a student ask me the idea of oiling out, why you should not oil out or why you should oil out. Well, if you're looking for textural effects where the paint has a drag, it has what they call in Spanish arrastrado. You need a seco or a dry surface in order to drag your paint, and this is sort of the beginning of that style. And Titian was a pioneer in using secco, which is essentially working wet paint on a dry surface. Today, a lot of artists are oiling out. They put a coat of oil on the surface, and I'm sure that Titian did that as well. But it's a combination of secco painting with uh, oiling out or wet into wet. So really important to understand that concept. And when you have a rough weave linen and you drag that paint over that rough weave linen, the paint sort of breaks and it creates this sort of textural pixelated effect. Really beautiful technique and very innovative for an artist of Titian's time. So here's another beautiful detail. There you can see how he's just essentially drawing with the color and with the brush. He's just not, I mean, even that nail, the detail of the highlight of that nail is just dragged. It's just a touch. These are touches, and even the glazes. There's some staining of the canvas. I remember seeing this painting in person and just being very impressed by the paint quality. There you can see the texture of the linen on the edge, which it might be a relining, but in either case, you just see that the paint is not, this is not a smooth painting as you would see perhaps in a French academic painting of the 19th century. This is really, really a robust type of painting that is approached in a very, very loose way. So really beautiful technique. So let's just move on to the next image of portrait of Cardinal Alessandro Farnese from 1545. And this is a beautiful portrait, one of my favorites at the Capo di Monte, also at the Capo di Monte collection in Naples. And this portrait really sang to me. I mean, this is a portrait from 1545, and here you begin to see how Titian is really coming on his own, coming into this beautiful style, very loose. He's very confident in his brushwork. And I want to show you a detail of this wonderful portrait of Cardinal Alessandro Farnese. By the way, if you haven't visited Naples, make sure to, if you're in Europe, it's a wonderful museum with a wonderful collection. So really, really a lot of wonderful images and a lot of wonderful paintings. Here you see a wonderful detail of this painting by Titian from 1545. And look at the beautiful strokes around the eye. So this is very suggested. There is some very controlled drawing on the right-hand eye, but on the left-hand eye, look how it's just essentially suggested. The face sort of falls into shadow, and he's using los realces or the highlights to bring out the form. So this sort of play of highlights and impasto really give a tangible three-dimensional aspect to the surface of the painting. Plus, you have the weave that is really sort of breaking up the brushwork and allowing for almost like a halftone, or what I like to think about as a cross contour development, meaning that the eyes, because there's textural, there's already texture on the surface from the canvas weave. We perceive the object as tangible. So the object seems, in this case, the subject of the portrait seems tangible. You could touch it because there's a textural effect on there that is being caused by the canvas. Really wonderful technique, and Titian was a genius, in my opinion, innovating this wonderful technique that Velázquez and a whole other array of painters are going to take advantage in the later centuries. So a lot of beautiful images there that you were able to admire, and really important to I believe we have one more image. Let's see. Oh yes. So let's see. Let's take a break real quick and go back to the camera here. So yeah, I have one more video to show you. And before I get into that video, I want to talk a little bit about um, just the idea of the surface. Now, the next video that I'm going to be showing you is a whole reconstruction of uh, the surface for the portrait of Girolamo Francastoro. And forgive my Italian, sometimes the pronunciation is difficult. So a lot of, well, I have some visitors I would like to say hello to. Monster Gaming, hello, thank you for coming by. And BA Humdinger, thank you. Thank you for coming by. I appreciate the note. Welcome again to the channel. So again, if you have any questions during the live presentation, I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. And any comments or any feedback would be wonderful. So I have this reconstruction, a video of a reconstruction, and there's some details that I want to mention before I show you the video. Remember that I'm doing very in-depth presentations here. A lot of you perhaps are not aware of a lot of these issues in the art of painting, but by going through every single one of my videos, you could sort of piece together the puzzle. I like to do themes, and in this case, I'm working with Venetian painting, and I want to highlight the use of gesso or calcium sulfate. Now, in the El Greco video that I shared with you guys, I talked about anhydrate versus dehydrate gessos, calcium sulfate. One is a slaked lime or slaked gypsum, and the other one's a natural gypsum. And I want to just report the findings that I've experimented with, and is that essentially it seems like like one material, for example, the slaked gypsum gives you a whiter gesso, a much brighter wet gesso that you could take advantage of. And this surface that you see here is a reconstruction of the natural gypsum. It has not been slaked or heated. It's just natural gypsum uh, mixed with rabbit skin glue and made into a gesso and applied on the surface and later an imprimatura. So it's important because today I'm going to show you a video of the natural gesso without the slaking or the heating. And in my video of El Greco, you could see the slaked version. So you have a comparison of both methods. So it's really important for those of you that are looking for that, the differences and the attention to detail of these materials. You see in a lot of the chemical analysis or the paint media analysis uh, that Titian sometimes uses slate gypsum, sometimes he uses natural gypsum, and for myself, I like to ask these questions: why is he using one or the other? And in this case, it seems, well, he had some materials available. Perhaps he didn't have other materials available, but there is a difference between both materials. And that's important too when you're doing your research and you're doing, creating your surfaces. It's important to know which material you're going to be appealing to. So let's just go ahead and take a look at this video. This is a reconstruction of the surface for portrait of Girolamo Francastoro from 1528. And I just want to narrate, this is the portrait right here, a beautiful portrait from Titian from 1528. And there you can see the stretched linen. I've shown this process before where you size the canvas with rabbit skin glue. But in this case, I'm using a very thin gesso applied with a palette knife. This, as described by a lot of sources in the manuscripts. There's also evidence from the National Gallery Technical Bulletin that this is the method indeed that Titian and a lot of Venetian painters applied their gesso using a palette knife. They find the knife marks on the surface, and there you can see that indeed there is some knife marks from the spatula, Okay. Now, important to mention, the gesso is very, very thin. You don't want a thick gesso because if you apply a thick gesso, you will run into problems. There you saw the pumicing, and here's a micro photograph from a cross section of the surface of the portrait. And you see the gray imprimatura, and I'm mixing here a gray imprimatura with lead white. They find lead white and lamp black in this portrait of Girolamo Francastoro. I'm mixing a very opaque color here, but I'm going to thin it out with heat-bodied linseed oil, which is oil that has been cooked with litharge. And they find this indeed in the portrait on the surface, on the chemical analysis. And there you see the imprimatura. This is a gray imprimatura, which is very different from El Greco's imprimatura, which is red, like a red earth color. And this imprimatura is applied in a very, very thin, application. And I'm going to explain to you why. I've stopped the video here. So this surface, again, I've had some of you that have written on the blog and have told me that they've had disastrous results with gesso. You cannot paint on top of the gesso surface. If you're going to paint on top of the gesso surface, you need to seal the surface, either with another layer of rabbit skin glue, very thin, okay, watered down rabbit skin glue, or a imprimatura. The imprimatura acts as a primer with color, but also as a sealer of the very absorbent gesso surface, okay? This is important. If you're going to use natural gesso, you need to seal the surface. If you paint directly on this surface, it will suck all the paint, all the oil from your paints, okay? So this is important, and I just, I'm making this disclaimer here because I've had a lot of you ask me these questions, and I like to be detailed about this information. So, okay, let's continue here. So I am using plenty of oil, and this will make the paint very sort of translucent. And there you see what a beautiful luminosity. And now I'm blotting the extra oil, wiping off the excess, which is documented by a lot of the manuscripts. You could take a rag, or you could take even a piece of cheesecloth or fabric and blot out the excess oil. So really important, and these are details that are going to make a big difference when you're preparing these surfaces. Now, I keep going on about these techniques, and I just want to let everyone know, coming up, I have a wonderful workshop that is a semester-long workshop. It begins on August 7th, and we're going to be copying Flora, the painting that you just saw on the screen. And this is a month-long copy that we're going to be working online. And I'm going to be teaching my students on how to make all these wonderful surfaces, the palette, the pigments. So it's a reconstruction class, essentially a class that will reconstruct these techniques. And for those of you that are interested, unfortunately, the workshop is for my Spanish-speaking audience. I plan to release these videos later on next year on the Udemy server. But for now, that workshop indeed is in Spanish. So, I have a question from Dark Clown 1560. Thank you for coming by. So, a Spanish question, and I'm going to translate it. A lot of the audience is Spanish speaking, but I'm also going to translate into English. So it says here, se aplica cola de conejo antes del yeso. Does the rabbit skin glue is applied before the gesso? Dark Clown is asking, yes, indeed. You have to always size the surface, okay? This is important because if you just apply the gesso without any rabbit skin glue, the surface is essentially, the fabric is going to suck all the rabbit skin glue, and the gesso is just going to stay on the surface. So I recommend just one very quick diluted layer of rabbit skin glue, and then you let that dry, and then you apply your gesso layer. It's just safer. You could apply the gesso. Now, acrylic gesso, you wouldn't have to do that, but for this technique, yes, you do. And this does take a lot of practice. You could run into a lot of problems very quickly with the natural gesso, but it does yield a very beautiful, very luminous surface. So really important. So I have another question here from MR. Thank you for coming by, MR. How do we start learning Renaissance and realistic drawing? So very good question. My recommendation is any studio or school that will offer life drawing or classical drawing courses, particular anything that has to do with figure drawing or anatomy, proportion. These are important techniques to learn, and this is important because when you're beginning to paint or to draw, you're going to need a historical background. You need to know about the great masters. You need to know what great painting is, and by having a class and having a teacher that will guide you, this will really help you, especially beginning from a book is difficult. That's one of the reasons that I'm doing these videos, but also the courses that I'm offering on the Udemy server are designed for that very purpose, to sort of give you a guide, a starting point in what is value scale, or what is proportion, perspective. All these things are necessary to undertake the art of painting. So I highly recommend a good teacher or a good school. There's a lot of great online schools that now are available with the pandemic. So really a lot of great resources online, but also really important to continue researching and practicing. So thank you for coming by, and I appreciate the question. Jaime, thank you for joining. Gracias por la visita. Jaime is a longtime student and a professor visiting today. Thank you for coming by, and a wonderful painter as well. I think I had another question here. Let's see. And I have another question from Mr. Pianoli. So yes, indeed. Thank you for your comment. Yes, technology has done wonders for us. And specifically, so much science, so many articles, so many journals that you could download and study. And even the radiographs, just being able to look through a Titian painting and just seeing the genesis of a painting, it's just amazing. That's one of the reasons that I like to share this information with you guys, because I remember as a student, asking my teachers, how did the old masters work? And it seems like it was a mystery. A lot of the teachers will say, well, it's very carefully, or even today, a lot of teachers use the transfer drawing method, which is essentially, transferring a drawing, a very detailed drawing, and then sort of filling in the gaps. And a lot of painters do use that method, but a lot of the great painters did not. They had great drawing skills. So it's important to really study great painting and figure out what makes a great painting. So a lot of information. And for those of you that are interested in the workshop, make sure to visit my page, ateliersanjuan.org. That's my school online. And I will be sharing some information, some links in the description below for you guys that are interested, in these classes, in these workshops. This is a semester-long workshop. We're going to be studying 4 painters in particular: Titian, Rubens, Murillo, and Borrero. 4 distinct techniques, and 4 very different artists from 4 different schools. So a lot of wonderful information. We're going to be talking about the brushes, the surface, the pigments, and the applications of paint. So make sure to check that link in the description below. So I have another question from Jason Escobar. Jason, thank you for coming by. Appreciate the question. Do you know how to build up thickly paint with many layers and keeping the surface smooth? Interesting question. So it's a very specific question, and my I believe that you're probably referring to there's a tendency for paintings in the museums to look textural, but at the same time smooth, and that's because they've been relined. That means that they're pressed, and a lot of the impasto becomes very, very smoothed out. Also, they've been over cleaned, and over time they get this sort of wore out, very smooth texture. But a lot of artists steel wool. And what is steel wool? Well, you paint, and when you finish painting, you go over the painting with a piece of steel wool, and that sort of takes back the texture, and then you build up on top. You steel wool again, and then you continue working with that method. And a lot of artists have been using that technique. I had a good friend that used that method, and he created these wonderful textures. So you could just paint freely, use steel wool. You could even use wet sand the painting. If you're using lead pigments, be careful. Just make sure that you're safe, and then continue to work the painting. So that's a method that you could employ. Painting the light. Thank you for your wonderful visit. That's another wonderful channel about the wonderful techniques of the old masters. If you haven't checked out Painting the Light, make sure to visit his channel. Says here, hi Luis, you're an amazing teacher and I have learned so much from you. Thank you. Greetings from Greece. Well, thank you. Thank you for commenting. I really appreciate the visit. Highly respectful channel. I very admiring of your work as well, and I really appreciate the visit. We do have a collaboration that we're going to be doing in the future with related to emulsions, a line of expertise of Painting the Light. He's worked with a lot of tempera, and I've seen a wonderful demonstration. So thank you again for commenting and your wonderful visit. So I have another question here from MR. Can people paint like the old masters, or has the knowledge been lost? Well, we're the channel here and many others on YouTube. We're trying to revive the old techniques. Now they've been lost, and a lot of the schools do not teach them. A lot of universities do not teach traditional gesso or traditional pigments. So this is my own initiative. I've created the channel because I wanted this forum, and this is wonderful. This is the reason that I'm doing this presentation and these presentations, to bring this message out for a lot of you that are just getting started, and that are admiring of the old techniques of the old masters. I, as a kid, was I remember my first time going to the Getty Museum. I grew up in California, and that was an important experience for me. And since that day, I've been enamored with the wonderful techniques, the wonderful subjects, the culture of painting from the 17 through the 19, even earlier. So my advice is to travel, to copy as much as you can, and to just keep practicing, and to just really love what you're doing. That's probably the most important thing. So thank you again for your wonderful question. So Mastery, thank you for coming by. Thank you, Luis, for generously sharing your knowledge. Reference to the video you kindly showed with the gesso apply. Are you suggesting to seal it with water rabbit glue above the gesso? Yes, so you could essentially seal the gesso with rabbit skin glue, one layer. So you apply the gesso, you apply rabbit skin glue, you apply the gesso with the palette knife or a brush, you let it dry, and then you seal it with rabbit skin glue, watered down rabbit skin glue. just a very, very light coat, and that will create a surface that will not absorb all the oil out of your paint. But it seems like this technique, the imprimatura had a double purpose. You got the color and you got the sealing effect on the gesso. So you could opt to do either one. So let's see, another question. And so I'm saying it, I believe it's Serra, but in English could be Sarah. So thoughts on Nicola Samore and the anti-art movement. Uh, I am not aware. I will be honest. I'm not aware of this movement, but I will research and I will come back with an opinion about it. But thank you for mentioning it. Um, let's see. Also, where's the workshop you mentioned? So the workshops that I'm doing right now are through my school, ateliersanjuan.org. This is my online school, and in the description below, there's a link to my school. You could also find us on Facebook, and I have some videos there on that are translated into. I'm sorry, they're broadcast in Spanish. For those of you that speak Spanish, Atelier San Juan is a Spanish site, and we also do English classes. But my audience here in Puerto Rico and in Latin America is Spanish speaking, so we do our live presentations at Atelier San Juan in Spanish, and also our classes. So if you're interested, check out the website for ateliersanjuan.org. So let's see. Mr. Amadeo, thank you for coming by. Says, thank you, Luis. Wonderful presentation. Greetings from Poland. Thank you for your wonderful visit. Never been to your country, but I'm hoping to travel there soon. Probably my next trip to Europe. So I imagine you guys have amazing museums and amazing artists. Thank you again for coming by. I appreciate the comment. So, okay, let's see. I have another question from Mr. Amadeo. Is the subject of emotions so complicated? So, I will be honest. I have worked with emotions. I'm not a big believer in emotions, and I want to do a collaboration with Painting the Light at some point. Uh, I'm looking for that in-depth experience, that in-depth knowledge of somebody that has worked with emotions. Now, the reason that I say this is because retouching a painting, Caravaggio, for example, retouch the their retouchings with emulsions, and yes, a retouching on an oil over an oil painting is one thing, but building up a whole painting from the ground up, I'm doing the research and I want to be thorough. There's a lot of artists or a lot of blogs that share the use of emulsions, but I have yet to find conclusive evidence of the extensive use of emotions in the painters that I admire, the painters that I'm usually talking about here, Titian, Rembrandt, Caravaggio, and everything that I do here, I really need evidence. It's one of the things that I founded this this channel on evidence way without concrete evidence. And once I have that, then I like to share that information, and I also do the experiments on the technical, actual practical experiments using the materials or painting with with these materials. It's really what my channel's about, and that's something that I really enjoy. It's something that, as a student, when I was going to art school, I had a lot of teachers that offer me opinions, and I like to really have solid evidence, uh, either in the form of technical journals or manuscripts, and the emotions don't seem to be. Um, this is something that scientists struggle with because they're not easy to detect. So I'm sort of waiting to see if I find that one article that has done, has cutting edge technology that could detect these materials. So National Gallery Technical Bulletin has published a lot of information on emulsions, but I don't yet I don't have one conclusive journal yet that I could, base a whole live presentation of. So yeah, so eventually we'll get to that. So let's see, Mastery. Oh, thank you for the invitation to London. I'm heading there at some point. I'm going. As a matter of fact, I want to do a live presentation from the National Gallery, even if it's just in front of the National Gallery. But I'm planning a trip to London soon, perhaps this coming semester or the following semester. So I appreciate. Maybe I'll reach out to you, Mastery. Thank you for commenting. So let's see. Thank you again, Ryan. Your comment. Let's see. Jose de Rivera. Yes, I'm very familiar with Jose de Rivera. Um, I will be doing a full live presentation on Jose de Rivera. That's one of my favorite artists. Again, I'm gathering the information. And for a lot of you that are asking the questions and coming by with your comments, I want to remind you, these presentations I do a lot of research for. I prepare, with plenty of time. Some of the presentations take me weeks researching the materials. I have to order the materials. So they take quite a bit of time to prepare and to be able to put together. So eventually I will get to our favorite painters, Jose de Rivera, more Vermeer, Caravaggio, more Titian. Today I'm just focusing on Titian's surface. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be doing more live presentations about his palettes, his brushes, and the way that he built up paint. So a lot of information. Eventually, I'll do Borrero, Rubens, Velasquez. So a lot of painters, a lot of information. But again, I want to thank you for your wonderful questions, your wonderful support. I really appreciate your visit. And again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. I believe that we're almost at 2,700 subscribers. That's an amazing number. I started with 13 subscribers, and I'm really excited. And your support keeps me going. I get on here very excited every time that I do the presentations to hear your questions, to hear your comments. And for those of you that are painting and want to share some of your techniques on the blog below, share your information with us. Share it with the community. That would be wonderful. So again, I want to thank you for your visit, and I will be back in 2 weeks' time with more information on Titian, particularly on his palette. There's a lot of lead colors that he used, a lot of blues, real guard. There's also lapis lazuli, azurite. So I'll be talking about those colors in detail and some of the mediums that he used. So again, thank you, and I wish everyone a good weekend. Thank you for coming by. Have a great one.